Rose Hall is a must-view destination if you're really looking into the slavery background.
Yeah.
And as I was explaining to you, you can confirm they're saying Rose Hall is actually still haunted.
Okay.
You know, and
Apparently, you know, since the American ghost chasers thing, a couple of programs that
the ghost hunters came here.
Yeah.
See? So Rose Hall is very famous, a very famous plantation just because of the horror that Annie Palmer used to put her slaves through.
Yeah.
And as I was explaining to you, I believe it's because she was a woman, she wanted to exert dominance. You know, they didn't want to, a white woman at that. She didn't want her slaves to think she's some pushover.
Okay.
So she probably was worse than a male slave owner. Just because she wanted it to have that fear from her. You know, they naturally have a fear of a male plantation owner. You know, this man, this big tall man with a whip over him. For a white woman, so she probably even did things 10 times worse than a male plantation owner.
Yes, people, I definitely know by looking at these pictures some people may be triggered. However, it is definitely important for us to continue to find out about the scars of black people, cloaked, who may be walking about looking as very okay. However, the effect of slavery continue. My name is Nana Essay, and I had to go down to Jamaica in order for me to be able to speak to people who have experienced or continue to live the impact of slavery on their day-to-day. I would equally ask of you to be able to join us on this channel where we celebrate Black excellence, and in order for you to do that, remember, click on the subscribe, click on the notification, click on the like button, and also share these videos with other people who may want to know about the lived experiences of black people, especially those of us or those who live around the world, including those who continue to live on the island, in order for me to be able to hold this amazing interview with residents of Jamaica.
So I was telling him about, he was asking if there's actually any active plantations still here. I was telling him that not really active, but Annie Palmer's plantation is still access to the public.
But they do have a Corbett Castle. You have which is in St. James, but that's a ruins though. There's another one in Centre. There's quite a few ruins around. Around the island.
But plantation-wise, Annie Palmer, Rose Hall. Rose Hall is definitely still accessible to the public.
So if kind of renovated it.
The second time you come back here, I don't know if you have time if you can catch it in the first. But
Yo, guys, my name is Nana Essay. I don't even know whether I need to introduce myself. I'm filming already. This is the natural. You know, I don't know whether I need to introduce, myself or the reason why I'm sat here. But what I said to you is, I was actually born in Ghana. And in terms of whilst growing up, we heard different stories. People from the Caribbean needs to come back to the motherland. We called Africa as the motherland. You need to come back in that, just for you to be able to maybe understand your journey or maybe finish, your transition in terms of who you are. But it did dawn on me, I've always loved reggae, from childhood. But I've always had a vibe to say that, if we are always saying to people, come back, I think it's about time we in Africa, we in other places, needs to come and see how our people, our ancestors, our brothers and sisters still living on the island where they were placed, just for us to be able to understand the whole, experiences, right? And lo and behold, I'm here in Welcome to Jam Rock. Just like we were talking about, today we're going to be talking about different stories. It's about slave trade. We may go into a bit of religion, where, we all stand. But equally, for us to be able to understand what it means by us as a people, we will go into mental health, and not just mental health. Kwame has a book, he's an author. I've spilled it all, he's definitely an author, and we need to make sure we understand things from maybe a black perspective, how these things do pan out. So guys, this is the situation. If I hear of the Caribbean, if I hear of Jamaica, slave trade is the first thing that comes to mind.
Right.
Yeah. And I think for me, the reason why I came, just like I was explaining earlier, is it was for me to be able to understand or see where, my ancestors were taken to. We're talking about what, plantation and that. Maybe let me come to you straight, Adrian, because you did say something amazing, something strange to say that you get triggered off at this age and time when you see cotton.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
I'm only 27, so I'm not that old. So
Old.
However, I do, as young as I am, I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of research. I like to stay. I think knowledge is power. So where I might not go and sit and read a whole encyclopedia or a book this thick off our library shelf, I do a lot of research online. And trust me, some things that I've read about that our slave ancestors used to go through. Right now, as a young 27-year-old, I see a cotton tree, I get triggered. Seeing it might sound funny, but seeing a cotton tree, it upsets me. It just makes me feel, I wouldn't say angry, but it just makes me feel some form of despair.
Okay.
Ill feelings. I just don't like seeing cotton trees. Probably, I should probably feel that way about sugarcane to and coffee. However, really and truly, cotton, it just gives me that trigger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, really rubs me the wrong way, as we Jamaicans would say.
Yeah.
Rub me the wrong way.
Wow. So I think these are the realities where people think, you know what, yeah, it's so many years ago, get on with it, you know, and move on. But we are having
That's what the
people,
Americans are trying to do right now.
you know, we are having people actually live with their own traumas, and, you know, not talking about it is equally traumatizing, you know, because you are re-internalizing your whole experience, but you've got no ways of bringing it out.
Exactly.
Kwame, you've talked about that journey of actually being in Ghana and actually going into what? Elmina Castle. Cape Coast. Tell me about that experience and what it means to you.
It's funny because that experience is a significant experience in my book. And I always because even though I can relate the experience, I feel that if I talk about it from my book in terms of how I've written it, people get to understand the levels in terms of emotional involvement and engagement. So if you don't mind, I want to read.
Go for it.
All right. So okay. So this is in the chapter called, if anyone gets my book eventually.
Can we show the title of the book? So Kwame has a strange title.
Yeah, My Date with Depression.
My Date with Depression.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. We will talk. We will ask the reason why you chose that title.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then I read the chapter. All right. So Wading Through the Wilderness. That's the chapter where it's from. So okay. So me and an ex went into she has encouraged me to go to Africa because she saw within me the struggles that I was having in terms of unknowing who I am, purpose in life, that kind of stuff. So the one thing I must give credit to our women most majority of the time that they can see things that we can't see.
Okay.
So she saw something in me which I didn't see for myself. So she said that I needed to take a trip to Africa, just for experience so that we could go together. So anyway. So I'm gonna read, like I said, from Waiting in the Wilderness, and this is what I'm gonna read. One of our first trips was to the Cape Coast enslavement fort, a whitewashed building on the Ghanaian coastline with parapets that overlook the beach and town. Our guide told us that from the parapets we could see in the distance the crucifix spires of 3 churches. And for sure, when we ventured to the top of the fort and looked over the town, we saw the churches and the spires, clearly against the bright blue sky, along with hundreds of people living within the city. Within myself, I found it ironic that those who profess to follow the Christ and supposedly love their fellow man allowed a cruel crime of humongous proportions to take place right in their view, or better yet, under their noses. What did that say about them and their religion, in quotation marks? I was extremely puzzled. We climbed down steps and made our way into the dungeon below the fort, and there I experienced another phenomenal spiritual moment that has stayed with me to this day. It was dark and foreboding, with a single bulb hanging from a wire, its light bouncing from the walls and the rocky roof, causing shadows to flit against the craggy walls. The atmosphere was stifling, and I felt I had been bundled in with another few hundred people, many of whom I never knew, into a room made for less than that number. I felt the spirits calling me, and I was without a doubt affected by the presence, the deafening silence embracing me. I was sure that there was an effect on the others too, since most of us, when we re-emerged into the beautiful daylight, were crying. Once in the dungeon, our tour guide showed us a rough line running parallel to the floor. He then showed us a window slit no bigger than 1 foot high and about half that wide, high up on the uneven wall. Naturally, within the dungeon, daylight could barely be seen. He then explained that because the land on the outside was level with the bottom of the slit, anytime rain fell, the water made its way into the cell. Imagine, hundreds of people packed in a space made for much less than that. Feces, urine, rainwater, grime, all swilling underfoot, knee-high or waist-high, even shoulder-high. and this in a confined, heat-suffocating place. I cried. We made our way out to the ground floor. Nothing needed to be said by any of us. Once there, we stood by the dungeon entrance, and right beside it was another large wooden door. A huge padlock secured it. I was curious, and decided to force it ajar as far as I was able to. I was dumbstruck. A stench assaulted my nose that would stay with me forever, and I still remain to this day unable to describe. When I asked the guide why the room was locked, he said that they, the caretakers or custodians of the fort, were unable to get it clean. That's right, they were incapable of getting it cleaned. I was silent. Here was a room which after hundreds of years was still unable to be scrubbed. I repeat, imagine, after hundreds of years, there was still a room that they were unable to scrub the blood, tears, perspiration, excrement, effluent, and death to the time when we visited in 2006. The visit to Cape Coast had a profound effect on me. It changed my outlook on life, prompting me to appreciate the simple things, giving gratitude to those who went before. The story even continued when I had another spiritual encounter on the Body Beach.
Wow. To be very honest, when you said blood, it dawned on me that you were going to continue with another word because I'm in Jamaica, right? I'm telling you. But that shows how much I was listening, right? But the reality is, how many people would actually go on such a journey for it to make such a meaning to them? But for you to be able to go on that journey, how did it make, in yourself as a person, your mental health, the way you looked at things and everything, how did they have an impact on you, in terms of going on that journey?
Well, which is interesting because prior to that trip, like I said, I was in a state of depression, brought on by other factors, losing a lot of money, investing money and losing it. So that was the factor that drove me into that space. And going into that environment, that energy, it's almost like, because you see a lot of us walk with masks. We walk around with masks, wearing masks, and we don't show our true selves. In front of the ancestors, if you want to call it that, I couldn't wear any mask. Okay. I couldn't show that I lost a lot of money. Yes, I was in a state of depression, but that was a mask I was wearing because deep down inside, I was still trying to be something that I was not. And in front of the ancestors, you can't be anything but true.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Okay. So being in that space, I was absolutely naked.
Adrian, let me come back to this question again in terms of, where mental health becomes an issue, and because of the culture within the system, people are not allowed to cry. People are not allowed to, vent out or even seek support. You did use an analogy, in terms of the slave master, what they used to shackle, people in terms of even being able to eat, but still allowed to go and worship somewhere. Share it with other people, because I think I was really struck by that.
Oh yeah, what I did stumble upon in some of my readings is that there were some mechanisms that were used to bar some of the slaves from eating. And some of those mechanisms involved putting something in their mouth at first that has a barb that sticks the tongue. Then it goes over the head and locks. So on top of having something blocking their mouth, something is now stuck in their tongue. So they can't eat, they can't drink, they can't even speak. They're just to work. You have to eat when you're told. You have to sleep when you're told. You are so controlled as a slave. However, what I found ironic was that the only thing that slaves are allowed to freely do is go to church.
Okay,
that's correct.
They were allowed to worship. How coincidental is that? You're not even allowed to eat unless it's on command. But yet you were free to go to church and worship and, serve the Christian God and, you weren't even allowed to read. Someone they designated one of the slaves to be the one that can read, and he's the preacher. The rest of you weren't allowed to read. You are only allowed to listen to what your preacher tells you.
Wow.
Yes, so only one slave was designated to read, and he would be the preacher. Wow. You aren't supposed to read the Bible and interpret it for yourself. Your interpretation of the Bible is what the preacher tells you. That's right.
Wow. And with that, you talked about the fact that even the person who is reading the Bible or who is able to read has to read to the slave master.
Through the slave master. He was the one that was taught to read by the slave master.
Right.
to read to him.
Yes.
Whenever.
Yes, that's the next one too. I forgot about that part. The only other exempted slave that had reading privileges was probably a house slave, and that is very minimal, sorry, and that's only because the slave master just didn't want to read a book for himself. Wow. That's the only other exception. Other than the preacher on the plantation, he or she, because you have female slave masters I was telling you about, the famous one, Annie Palmer.
Guys, check it out.
And if a slave master didn't want to read, our version of that today is audiobooks, he would teach his house slave to read and just sit down and read chapter 3, and she would read or he would read. Well, most house slaves were female. Teach her to read just so she could read him the book, and that is it, nothing more. Not for her own self-pleasure, not for her own self-knowledge or growth of knowledge, just to sit and read to that slave master because he didn't want to.
So this is how far we have come, you know, in terms of what it may mean for our ancestors to have gone through that. And I'm sure by this time some people may be asking themselves, if I don't like reading, is there a way of saying, you know what, I didn't want to conform? I will say to everyone, reading is important. Because we actually sat in a home and there are about 10 different fruits, you know, which we find interesting. But you can give me an explanation to say that, you know what, Nana, can you just imagine? We've got guava, we've got Aki. I'll show you guys what an Aki is. That's definitely, I will show you guys as well. But I think the interesting thing I'm trying to say is, this is where individual homes have got a cluster of fruits. How was it like maybe in the plantation where still people were not allowed to eat from these fruits that was just growing everywhere? You know, how do you think? I know we definitely didn't live it, but what do you think may have gone on for our ancestors?
Well, it's a good question, because I know that in terms of some of the dishes that we have today, it was because they didn't have access to particular food. So, for example, we have cow foot, you know what I mean, which is a plate, it's a dish which is fed because our ancestors weren't, and they didn't enable our ancestors to eat. They found ways of creating something, you know what I mean. So that it brought creativity, you know what I mean, the inability to eat from the slave master and so on and so forth brought creativity, and we were able to concoct our own foods, you know, to nourish ourselves, you know. So and we've carried that on. We've carried it on. Oxtail, the same thing. And
cow foot is, if the name is just tell what it is, tell the story. The cow.
Chicken foot too.
You know, we made a whole dish out of it. So while the slave master was inside eating the beef and the pork belly, we were outside making dishes with the hoof. And to this day, we are still eating it willingly, because we have mastered how to cook it so well.
Make it so tender.
And chicken foot soup. So chicken foot.
So we've mastered making dishes out of scraps.
To be creative with the food, you know. But
guys, it's amazing. For me, I think if I'm continuing this interview, we may have an hour, you know, tapping the brains of these amazing guys. But you know what? When we're talking about what we may have seen between our fathers and mothers, I think this is a big subject. You know, we may call it domestic violence. It's got so much, you know, context to it. But sometimes it's a matter of being able to look at it from a cultural perspective.
Definitely.
Pamela definitely talks about domestic violence in her book. She talks about the Trinity. Check out, you know, Pamela Arhin. She's an amazing person who talks about domestic violence in her book.
And I think that's also a throwback to what I've done before. You know what I mean? I think because of how we were treated, you know what I mean, then obviously, like I said, we internalized a lot of stuff. And throughout the generations, throughout the years, we have carried it on. We as African Caribbean people in particular, and African American, because we're the ones who were stolen and kidnapped. We never had a chance to. I don't think when George Floyd passed away, when they killed George Floyd, and he said he couldn't breathe, I said to myself, you know, that's African race in the diaspora. We haven't had a chance to breathe. Up to this day, we haven't had a chance to reflect, to look back, to create a connection between ourselves today and those who have gone before. Like I said, like I was saying, sharing with you before, we don't know the true story up until now.
So a lot of it is muzzled.
Yeah, man, we don't know the true story. When
I found out some of the true stories by digging.
Yeah, exactly.
By digging, you don't know. It's not really taught to the extent of what I'm saying, what me and Kwame are really telling you and breaking down to you. It's not taught in school.
No, it's not.
No.
And we've never had a chance to reflect on that, because a lot of what we're going through today is based on what's gone before. You understand? And we've never had a chance to look at that, what's in our DNA to cause us to behave in particular ways. And then the societal stuff that came after that. You know what I mean? The societal stuff that has come on after that. You know, but the root of it, like I said, is that disruption. Remember, you know, it's not a disruption for 10 years. You know? It's not a disruption of 5 years. It's a disruption of 400 years. And I think we have not come to terms with that to this day in terms of the impact of what that has on us as a people to this day. And then I started to observe, like I said, I started to realize as an African Caribbean man in the West, what was happening around me. Started to see the issues, started to see the isms, you know, with racism, sexism, discrimination, all that stuff I was going through myself. I started to pen poems. And I penned the poems, and then about in the early 2000s, I said, you know what, I think I was in Canada at the time, but it was just at the cusp of what I was going through. Somebody said to me, what are you good at? And I put all the poems together, my first poetry book. And I went to the schools, sharing, and again, like I said, it's a reflection of us, because I think being creative and being a creative and being able to tell our story through writing, poetry, prose, dancing, whatever it is, we have that as a people because we are creative people. Yeah. You know, so we tell our stories, and my role and my purpose is to tell stories through prose and through poetry and enable our people to understand ourselves, you know, and other people to see and understand who we are as a people, because a lot of people don't.
Whilst we continue to discuss the impact of slavery on us as people, equally in particular as black men, we decided it was about time for me to be able to speak to different people to be able to understand their own perception about the impact of slave trade on their own selves as well as their community. I ended up speaking to a group of individuals within the fishing community, and their views about slavery was totally different, bringing about the issue of reparation, forgiveness, and what needed to be done in order for people who experienced slavery as well as people who brought it on could support the various communities to be able to have a meaningful life.
They say we are from there, that side here. Because nobody it didn't go and hunt us down, you know. It's our own people. Put us on the ship.
Okay.
And first amount where they carry. I was reading some pamphlet, you know. Some of the men then jump overboard. That's why them start to shackle them afterwards.
Okay.
And they say they're not going.
They're not leaving their family behind.
In the Western world here, and look how we have where white people say, man.
Okay.
And they rape a mother. Kill with sister, kill with brother. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes you have to just forgive people. Because if you want forgiveness, you have to forgive people. Because most people said, who want God to forgive me for what I do, you know? But you don't understand. Say, first you have to forgive somebody before you get forgiveness to you what you do, you know.
So let me ask a question. If you're talking about forgiveness, do you think you can forgive without the person coming to you and say, yo, I messed up?
No, you can't forgive.
You can't forgive.
Because you know, as I say, man come and spoil you. And if it doesn't come to you and tell you that I'm sorry, you cannot know. You hear me say? You cannot know, because without that, you only can say in your heart
you're forgiving the person. But it needs to come from the other side first to say, I own up, I messed up.
Because what I read about again, we never used to talk English.
Okay.
We used to talk African. He beat us out of it. Say we are practicing Obi.
That's your religion?
That is no Obia.
Okay.
In English. We used to talk say Obi. Obi is your own language you used to speak.
You used to go out to the coconut tree and you talk and the coconut drop. Okay? Not a dozen, you know. If you want a dozen, you talk and a dozen drop. Wow. We were the most powerful people in the universe, you know. The white man beats it out of us. Burn us at the stake.
Alright guys, I'm definitely going to wrap up this time. I'm definitely having the best of my time here in Jamaica. My name is Nana SA. We run this channel called Black Next Gen, and what we do is we talk about black experiences, and lo and behold, I had to follow up my journey, you know, by wanting to feel the land. See me actually touch the land of Jamaica for the first time. I actually took a photo, you know, just to say my feet is actually touched the ground, because that's part of my journey. I wanted to do it. So yeah, if you watch it to this far, make sure you share it with other people. Let them understand, you know, this is what we do on this channel. Make sure you subscribe and click the notification button, because yeah, we need to grow as a community. We are not only here to faff around, misbehave and play. We will play around anyway, you know, you see the party and that, but this is the education side of the channel, which we think is really important for us to be able to create, for people to understand us as a community. If you are a female person, you know, out there from the Caribbean or even from Africa or other parts and equally identify as black, reach out to me if you want us to understand your journey as a community as well. I think I'll be more than happy to sit with our sisters before they actually make things crack. Yeah, guys, it's been amazing, and thank you very much for watching it one time. Kwame, thank you very much. Yeah,
traveling all the way from England to interview me.
Yo, can you just imagine traveling all the way from England to interview these guys? It's great. It shows how amazing they are as, you know, as men.
Trust me, he's going to have a part 2, because it's impossible to cover all of the Jamaican culture in 1 week and 1 video.
Yo, tell me about it.
Definitely look out for a part 2.
Guys, if you want to support me to be able to come back to Jamaica, make sure we've got a GoFundMe page. Go and support us. We will get a bit of money and come back for the next one. Yeah? We will grab no bagger of women. We're coming here to work. Yeah? Yo, Karen, thank you very much.
Thank you, man. Good man.
And they use